Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we have ourselves the Acute Angle Mini PC. Now this thing does look pretty cool. It's got some real wood, it's got some aluminum, and in theory some pretty decent specs. Speaking of specs, what this thing has is an Intel quad-core and 3450 CPU, 8GB of RAM, 128GB of SSD, and 64GB of eMMC. And yes, we will take it apart and show you guys what it looks like on the inside, as well as how to upgrade the SSD. We have some ventilation on the side, on the top, and pretty much an almost seamless wooden design here. The wood here is pretty fantastic. I have to say, the finish on it is pretty great. It's very smooth, you cannot feel the seams here. And on the front, we have the power button, the reset button, which you would think would be an LED indicator, but it's not. We got two USB 3.0s on the front, and if you are wondering about the power button, that should glow in blue. And the same goes for the transparent seam right here that is made out of plastic. This thing is supposed to glow in blue as well. And finally, on the back, we have the aluminum base, stand, whatever you want to call it. And inside of it, you'll find the power jack, another USB 3.0. It would have been nice if there were at least a couple more in the back, but that could be a hardware limitation. An HDMI, an Ethernet, and a headphone/speaker out jack. And lastly, two screw holes on each side to take it apart. Plastic, wood, plastic, metal. So let's go ahead and quickly take it apart. Now on the sides here, you can find the two LEDs that are supposed to make this whole area glow, except they are very weak and the light distribution mechanism is pretty terrible. So really, all you'll see is some very, very faint light coming out from the sides. So here's what we have here. Basically, this thing was made back in the year 15, May 29th. So you can really tell that this thing is pretty old, and it explains the old CPU. Now, it is not a terrible CPU if you know how to utilize it. But with that being said, there are a couple more screws right over here. So we're going to go ahead and take it apart. And if you're wondering what this cable is, it could be some kind of grounding cable. I'm not even too sure. But one thing for sure is that this thing has some coil wine that is on the whole time. In fact, the coil wine is so bad that I'd rather have the fan being on the whole time than having some coil wine, since it's more of a humming noise instead of a faint high-pitched noise. Alright, so here we are looking at the idle temperatures of this thing. Everything is booted up, everything is settled, and what we have here running in the background is Discord, Steam, Lightshot, and the cam software that you're looking at here, so you can monitor some things. 55 to 60 degrees Celsius, you could say it's on the high end if it was a laptop, except this thing is a desktop with a fan and a heatsink. So you would think it would have better temperatures as well as better performance, but unfortunately that is not the case here. So I didn't realize this up until now. Apparently this thing does not have an internal clock battery. And as you have saw, basically every time you unplug the power and replug it, the clock will reset to the year 2111. Out of the box, Windows was originally installed on the eMMC storage, which is of course much slower than the included SSD that they have here. So I went ahead and reinstalled Windows on the SSD, and now it boots up and everything feels much snappier. So boot up times went from 35 seconds to around 12 seconds or so. Now speaking of the SSD here, it actually has no name, unlike the eMMC, which is a SanDisk. The write speeds are not the best, of course. They could be faster, around 550, but it's a cheap SSD, it's a cheap system, what do you expect? That being said, with something like this, the read speeds are more important than the write speeds. Since you're going to be opening programs, booting this thing up, and doing all that kind of stuff, you're going to be reading files more than writing. Now, how does it actually perform? Well, as you can see here, the performance in the Cinebench R15, it's not great. You're getting 129 CV and 11.49 FPS. Now, the OpenGL test for the graphics card, it's normal. It's not a beefy graphics card by no means. But the CPU, it's pretty bad. It's 130, and we have seen much higher scores, mainly referring to the EasyBook 3 Pro, and the numbers will be on the screen with the EasyBook 3 Pro. That is a laptop, and has much better performance and a much better BIOS over this thing. The BIOS on that thing is fully unlocked. You can customize and change the settings and improve it. With this one, the BIOS is fully locked. You cannot change anything other than the UEFI settings, the boot settings, and that's about it. You cannot really tweak this thing to make it faster. you really cannot improve it. So with that out of the way, don't expect to be playing any games. I have already tried CSGO, BlazBlue, all the different variants. They are just unplayable. I've also tried Risk of Rain, which is of course just way overpowered for this thing. And really the best games you can play on this thing are most likely emulators and lightweight games like Sonic Mania, which works perfectly fine on this thing. But the games I was able to install and actually enjoy is Counter-Strike 1.6, Horizon Chase, and Sonic Mania. So here's a quick montage of the games that are running on this thing. And there you go, these are a couple games you can enjoy on this thing that are going to get you some very nice frame rates. As for video playback, this thing can do both YouTube and VLC at 4K 30fps without much issues. Now if you're planning on running this thing on a 4K TV or monitor, then you may encounter some problems since this thing can only do 4K at 30fps. That being said, if you have a 4K TV or a monitor, then I don't know why you'd be getting this thing. You should be looking at something that has more power. So really, you're going to be stuck with 1080p 60fps, but that is perfectly fine because the price bracket for this thing is most likely what you're going to be using this thing for anyways. So really at this point, there's not a whole lot to talk about other than going ahead and concluding the video. So let's go ahead and do that. And so guys, that is actually pretty much it for this video. So should you get this thing, is it worth the looks and is it worth $200? Well, for $200, you're getting a pretty decent deal. I mean, it looks pretty cool, it's got real wood for a case, and overall the build quality is pretty decent. Now as for the specs, you are actually getting a pretty decent deal. You're getting 8GB of RAM, 128GB SSD, and 64GB eMMC with Windows 10, as well as the N3450 CPU, which is being hindered by the BIOS and however they have it set up. The temperatures are pretty bad, and you cannot tweak the BIOS to make it better. Temperatures can of course be improved by adding some thermal paste and whatnot, but overall, it is a pretty decent computer if you're just looking to do some documents. Maybe you have some kids that play Roblox, this thing will do the job. And if you're just watching videos on a 1080p monitor, then this thing is perfectly fine. Just browsing and doing that kind of regular stuff on a PC like this will be perfectly fine on 8GB. Just don't try to play anything crazy. And basically those are the pros. It's a simple computer that has some pretty decent value for the price. As for the cons, I actually don't have a whole lot of problems with this thing. I mean, it's got the coil whine, which isn't very audible if you have it far away from you. The LEDs here are not perfect. I mean, look at these. These are very faint LEDs. You really cannot see them until you look for them. And lastly, taking a look at the back here, there's not a whole lot of USBs, so you will have to get yourself one of these guys right here. Just a regular USB hub, so you can plug in your keyboard, mouse, and whatever else you have to plug. Having cables routed through the front here is not cool. But yeah guys, that is actually pretty much of this video. This thing has been kind of a roller coaster for me. First I thought it was going to be a pretty good PC since I have seen good things coming out from the CPU on a laptop, and I expected it to be as good or better than the laptop, which is the EasyBook 3 Pro. But then as I was testing it, I was kind of disappointed with the game performance. But then considering the price and the looks and the 8GB of RAM you're getting with this thing, it's a pretty decent value, it's not terrible, and of course, as usual with these kind of computers, you can upgrade the SSD. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video, so if you guys are interested in this thing, I'll leave a link for it in the description below, along with a coupon. And yeah, thank you all for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, found it helpful, hit the like button and subscribe, contact this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care everyone.